Hello again! I hope you're all looking after yourselves and those around you. Now I'm really excited today because this is my first request video, so thank you so much to Lila, who is learning about the Romans at the moment, for making this suggestion. So today we're going to be looking at the Roman era, but the Roman era is very long. It begins in 753 BC when Rome was founded and it ends in about 476 AD. So that's a span of over 1,200 years, and that's a lot to go through in one video. So what I thought I would do is pick out my 5 favourite facts about ancient Rome and the Roman Empire to share with you today. We might get joined by Olivia the cat at some point. You haven't met Olivia the cat yet, but she likes to sleep on the bed, which is where I'm filming this video, like a really old school YouTuber video today. So hopefully she decides to jump on the bed and join us, and you can meet 2 of my pets. Well, the beginning is always a very good place to start indeed. I think that comes from a Disney film, doesn't it? Something in Alice in Wonderland. But the beginning is a good place to start. So fact number 1 is actually a story. In fact, it's a myth. It's the myth of Romulus and Remus, the tweens who... Tweens? They were twins. They might have been young. I don't think they were tweens though. But they're the twins who founded the city of Rome. So Romulus and Remus were twin boys born to a princess named Rhea Silvia. And their father, supposedly, was the Roman god of war Mars. Although in some versions of the story, their father is Hercules, who was a demigod. Either way, their dad was strong. And the king of the place where they lived was scared that with a father like that, someday Romulus and Remus would overthrow him and grow up and take his throne. So, oh, Olivia's here. Can you see her? This is Olivia, guys. She's my little cutie. Just so you know, I called my cat Olivia before Taylor Swift did. Well, actually, I adopted her and she was already called Olivia, so... Oh, hey, sweet girl. Oh, you come to hang out with us. Okay, hopefully she settles herself. So anyway, the king was afraid that Romulus and Remus would overthrow him and take his throne. So what he decided to do was that he would take the twin boys and he would send them onto the river Tiber, thinking that they would either die, drown, or be eaten by animals. But the king misjudged the kindness of animals, and the boys were raised by a she-wolf who cared for them, protected them from other wild animals, and a friendly woodpecker also shows up in the story too, pardon me, to help them find food. So the she-wolf looked after the twins until a shepherd came one day and took them home to be looked after by him and his wife. And that is when they were named Romulus and Remus. The story goes that many years later, when the boys grew older, they became really natural leaders. And one day, Remus was captured and taken to the king who'd been so afraid of them that he sent them down the river to die as babies. And when he was taken to the king, he discovered his true identity. And meanwhile, Romulus, being the good brother that he was, gathered some of their fellow shepherds to rescue his brother. Now, they ended up killing the king, who had originally sent them away as children, hoping that they would die. And when everyone else in their original city learned who the boys were, they offered to crown them as joint kings so that they could be rulers of their homeland. However, the 2 boys decided they were going to turn down their crowns because they didn't consider it their home, and they wanted to found their own city. So the twins, they set out to find the perfect spot for their city. And unfortunately, when 2 people tried to form a city... Hi Beans, how are you doing? Oh dear, he's going to probably end up upsetting Olivia. I really hope not. But there are often problems when you try to start something like a business or a city with another person. It doesn't matter how much you get on with them. But the 2 boys couldn't decide on which of the 2 hills in Rome that they were going to use. Beans? Calm down, mate. Do you know what? Quarantine is getting to this dog. I have been taking him for walks, but honestly, he is just desperate to play and go out all the time. He's still quite young. He's only 14 months. But Olivia here is such a sweetheart. She's quite an old girl. She's 13, almost 14, and she just likes to have a nice sit down. She just likes a cuddle. She likes to have her lovely soft belly rubbed. They do get on with each other, but she would just rather sit and do nothing, and he thinks he's playing. That's not really what's going on. In her mind, she thinks when he's trying to play that he's trying to fight, and she's not here for that. Anyway, back to the story of Romulus and Remus. So what usually happens when two people set out on a venture together is that they end up not agreeing on something, and they had an argument over where the perfect spot for their city actually was. Now Romulus, he wanted to use Palatine Hill, and Remus was adamant that they used another hill called Aventine Hill, because there are 7 different hills in Rome, but these are the 2 they were arguing about. So the 2 brothers, they decided they're going to resolve their argument through something called an augury. And an augury is a kind of mystical way of interpreting what they thought the gods wanted by studying the flight of birds. However, the 2 brothers disagreed completely over the interpretation of the augury when the birds came, so they completely failed to reach any kind of agreement. And so what happened was both brothers ended up going about making their own city on each of these different hills in different locations. So Romulus, he decided he was going to construct a wall around his city, and Remus thought that was absolutely ridiculous. Why is he trying to create a wall to keep his own brother away from him? So what Remus decided to do was the most obvious thing, which is that he climbed over the wall to make fun of his brother, and at that point Romulus killed him. So not a very happy ending for Remus there. And once he was dead, his brother Romulus obviously completely regretted his actions, but he still established his city and he named it Rome after himself, Romulus. And the idea that he had for Rome was that he would welcome settlers from all backgrounds and make sure that people were all treated the same, whether they were slaves or free men. And soon the population of the city grew, it expanded, and altogether it covered 5 of those 7 hills that I mentioned earlier, including Aventine Hill, the hill that his brother had wanted to build it on. So that is the story, or the myth, of how Rome came to be. And the rest of my facts are going to be quite a bit shorter than that story, but I felt it was a good place to start. So, now fact 2 I think is quite interesting. Roman emperors actually took a little bit of poison every single day, if you can imagine that. Some of us take medication every morning or perhaps even a few times a day to keep us fit and healthy, but Roman emperors, they took a small amount of poison every single day in the hope that it would give them immunity. I suppose it's a bit like what a vaccination is today. Beans, Olivia is not going to throw a toy for you. Do you know that? So yeah, I guess the idea was immunity, like a very early vaccination. Fact number 3, the Romans were obsessed with poo and wee. Yes, that is grim, but those Romans, they knew how to make use of absolutely everything that they had. So, poo, both human and animal, was used as a fertiliser in Roman times, much like it is today, not really much of a difference there. But the more surprising fact is that urine was used as a cleaning product for whitening clothes and sometimes for whitening teeth. So the Romans realised that when urine was left to stand for a little bit, it would decompose and it would turn into ammonia. And ammonia as a chemical compound actually really will whiten your teeth. And so what the Romans did is that they used to use the ammonia as a mouthwash. They would swill it around their mouths, and amazingly, they had bright white teeth. Fact 4. So one of the most recognised symbols of Rome is the Colosseum. Now for most of us, we know that the Colosseum is where criminals were executed publicly, because people loved watching violence back then. Mythological plays were performed there, and then animals and gladiators fought one another there. But a lesser known fact about the Colosseum is that they would often flood the entire arena in order to stage mock naval battles for the crowd. And the first recorded stage sea battle at the Colosseum was organised by Julius Caesar in 46 BC to show off to his people how he had conquered Egypt. I mentioned just now actually that people really enjoyed watching violence back then. I think that's actually quite similar to some people today, isn't it? That's not that different. It's funny how we always think that we're so different to people in the past, but actually if you stop and think about it for a second, people still really enjoy violent movies, things like that, so it's not that different. Fact 5. Okay, another toilet related fact for you, sorry. Now, although the Romans invented the first public toilets and public sewers, meaning that there was overall really good public health in ancient Rome, there was still a very real risk that you could die in a Roman toilet. Now, some Romans actually had to pray to the goddess of luck, Fortuna, before entering the toilet every single time, because it can be so risky. So the toilets were very rarely cleaned, which meant that you could obviously very easily pick up an illness or a disease, especially because the rats that lived among the poop-filled sewage under the aqueduct system would sometimes crawl up and bite your behind, that's several things that are already quite problematic there that could hurt you. Another thing that people had was that they shared a sponge on a stick to wipe themselves with, and that sponge never got cleaned. Also gross. My stomach is actually churning thinking about it. But so much worse than these diseases you could get, you could die in a toilet because the toilets often exploded. Now, this was because of the buildup of methane in the unclean sewers, which meant that you going to the toilet meant you could often be caught in an explosion. And I've got a bonus fact. Okay, I know I said this was only going to be 5 facts, but I think this one is really, really important, and I think it's important to represent groups who are not often discussed in history whenever we can. So, the Romans didn't really categorise sexuality like we do today. They didn't really have words for gay or straight, and in fact the expectation was that in your youth, while you were young, you were quite likely going to be attracted to both men and women. And I like that idea because it doesn't make any assumptions about who you are, who you will be. It doesn't dictate who you're meant to be when you grow up if you don't expect someone to be gay or straight. And although it wasn't an entirely admirable system, because there was still an expectation that once you were a grown-up, you would still marry someone of the opposite sex and have children. But the thing is, what we know about that time is that one particular Roman poet, Catullus, wrote a lot of poetry about gay love, and he wrote that people of the same gender could and did form lasting and loving relationships with each other in the Roman era. And I think it's important that we remember that, because it tells us that those folks who are against LGBTQ people today are literally dinosaurs, because the Romans made their peace with sexuality like 2,200 years ago. So although the Romans weren't perfect in that respect, I think it's really important that we acknowledge them. So that's it from me today. Let me know if you have anything else you would like to learn about, and I will happily make more videos for you. So for now, stay cute, be kind, and please subscribe.